السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The month of Sha'ban and the importance of this blessed month, that the Prophet ﷺ would fast in it more than any other month, requires for us and families and everyone to really prepare ourselves sincerely for the month of Ramadan. As the early generations of Islam used to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them witness the month of Ramadan because of the great rewards in it. And when the point that I wanted to, you probably heard things in khutab and in durus, but the point that I wanted to remind myself and everyone is that the ʿubūdiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the servitude of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be abd to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not according to what we like or what we find ourselves inclined to do or easy for us to do. And it's very easy for a person to lose the sincerity and to lose the truthfulness. That's why it's to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So some people that it's easier for them to fast, but it's not easy for them to pray Fajr, for example. Or some people it's easier for them to give charity, but not easy for them to fast. So things like this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the different acts of the ibadah is not according to one's desire. It's not one thing and one thing only, but many different things. To show who is sincere and they are seeking really the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, regardless of what they like, what they're inclined to do, things like this. So that's why we have to be tested, so that things are against our desires and we still do it. And no one ever said that for someone to be upon the religion and steadfast upon the religion, that means they have to be in state of joy and everything feels so beautiful and so nice, meaning physically. No, there's a level in that in the soul by being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But as we see, fasting, for example, is not something that is pleasant for someone to be hungry and to be thirsty. But because of the love of Allah and the fear of Allah and hoping for the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person then is patient. And a person loves what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. And some people, they thought that the way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through sacrifice, and only sacrifice for the sake of sacrificing. And they were wrong. Some people, they think that the only way to worship Allah is to give da'wah, or to read Quran, or to be secluded in matters of ibadah. All of that is wrong. The ibadah is to be abd to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever state that a person is in, any time that a person is witnessing, in any situation, according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So this is one of the important meanings to understand. So being a woman, or being a man, or being a wife, or being a daughter, or being a mother, or a father, every role that we have in our life, we have to make sure that we follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to fulfill this role according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with. And we have in the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam the best examples. And as for example, how to wear hijab. This is one of the tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the believing women. Al-hijab is a way of life, is not a type of clothing that she wears, which is that she stays away from the eyes of those who are not mahram to her. Whether she, as mentioned before, if she is at home with her husband, and of course, people would say she's not wearing hijab then. but she is in state of hijab. She in the state of al-hijab, where she's at home with her parents or her family. She's not covering her hair. She's wearing the normal clothing that she would wear at home, but she is in the state of hijab. Why? Because she is away from the eyes of those who are strangers to her. So she get rewards for that. And that's why if someone comes in, if she walks out of the house, then she is still continuously observing that state, that she is protecting herself, covering her adornment, wearing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded her to wear in a way that it does not shape her body, is not transparent, is not zina in itself, is not adornment in itself, no beauty whatsoever. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the women with this, meaning that women, they love to adorn themselves. This is part of their nature. وَمَنْ يُنَشَّأُ فِي الْحِلْيَةِ وَفِي الْخِصَامِ غَيْرُ مُبِينٍ. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about women, that they are raised in hilya, they love hilya. They love to adorn themselves, to put jewelry on, to put makeup on, to make themselves look nice. This is part of their nature. So, and this is part of the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that in her to make sure that she only does this in the permissible way, and that it's forbidden for her to do it in a haram way. And the shaitan doesn't leave anyone alone, and she will be tested whether she would adorn herself to other than her maharim or not. The same thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in the men certain things. So the thing is here that ʿubūdiyyah, the ʿubūdiyyah to Allah is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us through the wahy from Allah. Not anything else, through the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore one of the ulama, when he was asked by some of the women that why that you don't find among the women many ulama, many scholars, even though there is. And whoever reads in the Siyar or the biographies of a Salaf, there used to be women that are mashallah in the highest level of knowledge. Aisha radiallahu anha, great example for this. But the norm is that you won't find many of them, or muqri'at to the Quran, or musannifat. That means they're having books and books compiled. Why there is lots of women as there are for men? So the answer to this was that the fact that a woman, her energy and her effort, when it was directed to في تربية العلماء, in raising and upbringing the ulama and the ulama and the great men, وصناعة القادة, and to make the leaders and those who would establish the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is most of her energy is geared towards this. And it's, you see, for example, if you have doesn't have to be an example that doesn't have to be 100% halal, but say, for example, if someone is watching a movie, for example, right, or there's a program that you watch online that is halal. Of course, it's for the movies, for the things are haram, of course, when it has haram in it. But what the point here is, how many people are working to get that type of work out to the people? There are so many of them, but the people, they only see the presenter, and they think that that's it. That's the only one that is working to attain this, is the presenter. But there are tens of people that are working behind the scenes, and their work is not less important as the presenter. Oftentimes, the presenter is the least, even in effort and in maybe talents and things like this. So, and that's exactly what is needed to be recognized, that it's not about being in the upfront of things that a person then becomes successful, or the definition of success, or who's affecting the communities and the world and things like this, who's getting the best of the rewards. Those who get the best of the rewards are those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the women to be their first and foremost important duty in this life, after the rights of Allah and after worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to raise Everyone, men and women. This is a job that no one can have that level of talent that the woman Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave in her. That requires sacrifice, yes. Requires things that she might not like, of course, but that's how life is. But it's all rewardable, inshallah ta'ala. And when, for example, the woman that came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she complained about how the men, or she, that's how she thought, that the men have been taking all of the rewards and the women are staying home. She understood exactly what was the role. The Asma bint Yazid. And even though some had talked about the authenticity of the hadith, but the hadith is sound in some of the narrations. But the point here is that the Prophet ﷺ was very pleased with her speech and her question. That she said that the woman sent her to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said to him that, O Prophet of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent you for both men and women. We believed in you and followed the guidance from you. But then we see that the men have advantage by وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ فَضَّلَكُمْ عَلَيْنَا. She said that Allah had gave you an advantage over us, virtue over us, by what? By the jama'ah, praying jama'ah in the masjid, jum'ah, عيادة المريض, visiting the sick, following the janazah, الجهاد في سبيل الله. And she said, وَأَفْضَلُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْجِهَادُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. She would see that al-jihad fi sabil is the best of all of this. And if one of you go out غازيا أو حاجا أو معتمرا, go for hajj, go for umrah, we will حفظنا أموالكم, we will guard your wealth, وغزلنا أثوابكم, and we fix your garments, وربينا لكم أولادكم, and we raise for you your children. And we are معشر النساء مقصورات, محصورات, مقصورات, that means we are limited, confined in our place, in our homes. قواعد بيوتكم. So where is the reward for us? The point here that the Prophet ﷺ, he looked at his companions and he said, سمعتم بمثل مقالة هذه المرأة. Have you ever heard the like of that statement of that woman? You know, that she was so guided to present her case in such a way, and she showed exactly what they were upon at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And let those who are upset or don't like it, it's okay. But this is how the wives and the women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they stay home, they guard their husbands, their parents, whatever, their households. They would do the things that they would do at home, and one of which is raising your kids. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard this from her, he said, أعلمي, or said, أعلمي, have the knowledge, وأعلمي, and know and send this knowledge to those who are behind you from the women, those who sent you, من وراءك من النساء. That what? أن حسن تبعل المرأة لزوجها واتباعها موافقته ومرضاته يعدل ذلك كله. That the good wifeship, if it's correct to say it like this, حسن تبعل المرأة for her husband, and following him, what he likes, and his pleasure, to fulfill his pleasure, is equal to all of this. She gets all of what she said. So the woman, after she heard this, she did not, and again, when we say these types of things, we might have someone, but if this and that, and we have some expectations or exceptions, but what if this and what if that, right? The questions might come up while you're hearing this type of a hadith. The woman, she did not ask the Prophet ﷺ anything. She فانطلقت تهلل وتكبر وتحمد الله عز وجل. She left making tahleel, لا إله إلا الله, Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah. She's so happy that she left with making these types of dhikr. She's so happy to hear that from the Prophet ﷺ. In one of the narrations, طاعة الزوج واعتراف بحقه, the obedience of the husband and acknowledging his right on her. Right? So again, the point is, of course, someone would say, but how about the men? The men, they were commanded, وَاسْتَوْصُوا بِالنِّسَاءِ خَيْرًا, take care of your women, be kind to them, and we have in the Prophet ﷺ the best example, and so on. And this is how the competition between them, because when she came and she described the affairs of the their husbands, they were not lazy or hanging out or leaving their wives in the home, and they're going sitting on in the cafes with their friends, or watching soccer, or watching sports activities, or going this and that. That wasn't the case, and that's why the imbalances that we have in our life. You would have men that are asking for their wives to be, mashallah, like the wives of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu. But is he like the men of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum? And then you would find women asking for husbands to be like the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, kind to the women and so on. But is she like the wives of the companions radiallahu anhum, as this woman described the matter like this? So then when we see the matter is not as we expected, then myself and everyone and each one, we should blame ourselves first. So when we see our spouses, they're not acting the way they should, as we hear the ayat of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, before we blame them, we should blame ourselves. And you don't have to blame yourself to the entire world. You can blame yourself to yourself, between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is happening because I'm not being the perfect husband. I'm not being the perfect wife. We all have weaknesses and deficiencies. Right? And with the fitan that we're in, that we witness, you would find those who would justify whatever fits the desires of people. Many people are not saying the truth. You know, we're calling the men to be men and calling women to be women. And to, for the men to be kind to their wives and to their spouses, and to be overlooking things, and to be, with gentleness and all of these things, and not to waste their time in following their desires and ignoring their wives, for example. And on the other side, the women are, how many people are saying for the women to be obedient to your husband, follow your husband, and stay at home, observe the hijab, the way Aisha radiallahu anha wore the hijab, not the way that the fashion ones are doing, or those who might show in some Islamic conferences and things like this. This is not the way that the Sahabiyat used to conduct themselves. And this is with all due respect. And once you hear with all due respect, that means what comes after that is not very pleasant. But where is that in the life of the companions radiallahu anhum, or the ayat of the Quran, that a woman would come out to the public like this, with her face showing, addressing the people, talking deen and lectures and things of that nature, and they think that this is okay. This is not permissible whatsoever. And thinking that this is da'wah for the sake of Allah, and this is spreading the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that doesn't have to be in the same way that the men would do things. So again, the ʿubūdiyyah to Allah. So going back to where the question, when one of the scholars, he was asked about this, he said that most of their effort and their energy was geared towards raising the real men. So does that mean it makes the ulama, those who their mothers raised them, of a better and a more virtuous status than their mothers, for example? Of course not. Their mothers are better than them because they are their mothers, and they are the ones that raised these individuals. Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, he mentioned in that, and we talked about that before, Sufyan al-Thawri, one of the imma of the deen, and his mother would say to him, Ya bunay, utlub al-ilm, wa ana a'ulak bimaghzili. Oh my son, seek knowledge, and I would take care of you, support you with my maghzil, the way that making the clothes with the threads and things like this. The same thing. Who raised the Imam Bukhari rahimahullah? His mother, not his father. His father was he died when he was young. Imam Malik, the same thing. Imam Ahmad, the same thing. And it's such an amazing thing that most of these great ai it was their mothers that raised them, and no one knows. Even you have to dig very deep into the books to know the names of their mothers, if there's a name mentioned. And they didn't care about this. Why? Because what they cared about is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us have the proper understanding of what is the ʿubūdiyyah and what it means, and to seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these matters, and to avoid the fitan and these trials and these tribulations and these social medias and all of these things that does not bring for the most part, accept what is evil and what decreases the iman. Of course, there's good in anything, but there's good and evil. So to avoid what is evil and to really seek the authentic knowledge and to be patient with the deen of Allah and to make dua and to sincerely turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what we need to revive among our communities to bring back the proper hijab, the proper obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the understanding of things, not to be defeated by others by thinking, oh, that we are less than them or inferior to them because we're following the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the opposite. You feel bad for them, really, when they don't follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. So I just wanted to give that reminder. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for each and every one of us. Barakallahu feekum. طيب, wallahi, forgive me that we'll stop here, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and give us all the proper understanding, inshallah, of our deen and to protect us and to protect the people from their evil within their own selves, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.